So today we're going to take a look at the isolated bass and drum tracks from two early Megadeth songs, both off the album Peace Sells But Who's Buying, and both of them being played by David Ellefson. The reason I decided to do two tracks on this one is it's really interesting how different these two bass parts are. One is very guitar driven, very locked in, and would really be considered a bass guitar type of approach. The other one is the complete opposite. It's a much more esoteric approach to the bass line, completely strays away from what the guitars are doing. And it's very cool that both of these lines were done on the same album by the same player. So it's going to be kind of an interesting examination to see these two in contrast and see how wide an interpretation there can really be inside of metal and rock bass. So we're going to start with the Conjuring. Let's get into it. Okay, something to take a look at right there is it's a bass line that's being played underneath of the guitar players doing long held chords and some tapped harmonics going on over top of it. So it's a very open type of approach. And this bass riff doesn't have anything to do with the rest of it. The most interesting thing is that this is actually, the part being played by the bass is actually the riff to the B section of the verse. A lot of people haven't tuned into that's what's kind of being snuck in there. So you'll hear that part again later on played by all three members. It's really strange that he would choose a completely different part of the song to play this under. This tells me one of two things very likely happened. Is when they wrote this riff, they originally thought of it as a two guitar part with, one guitar having the chords over it and the other playing the riff. And they liked that idea. So they reinterpreted it to be a beginning part and to start in the song. And it's really kind of an interesting way to arrange the song. Or two, they were running a couple of different ideas and experimenting with that part and decided that they liked all of them and found a way to use them. If you're a songwriter at all, or you come up with different versions of the same riff, a lot of times I've seen guys that'll just kind of toss out ideas or try and refine it down to their favorite version, or decide exactly how they want to, which one they want to pick for the final one. And I have to go with the idea of use them all. It's always interesting to hear different permutations of something, or hear a riff evolve or be played differently each time through a song. It really adds a lot of drama to something. And I can almost guarantee that's probably what happened here, because I can't imagine them having this part and the bass player just going, oh, why don't I play this completely other part of the song underneath of this for no apparent reason and just make this part. It was probably composed, and that was one of the options they had, or one of the ideas, and they just kind of adapted that for this intro part. So it's very cool, and it's kind of an insight into their songwriting. But it's cool that he decided to keep that bass line going and just strip out the second guitar, doubling it. And they have a really interesting intro that you don't realize later on in the song you're hearing the same riff over again. So let's keep going. Another really cool thing here is the use of absolutely locked in breaks. That gives a lot of intensity to what's going on, and they're using it really effectively here. Dave is absolutely dead on with Gar Samuelson, the drummer. They're creating just a machine rhythm section, and these constant accents that leave short breaks, this kind of stutter stop motion that they're doing. Some of the breaks are long in between sections, and some of the things are just hits where they're just dropping for an eighth and coming right back in. And they are dead on with each other. It's something that's incredibly effective, but if you're not tight as a drum, it's just a train wreck. It's either awesome or a disaster. And they're pulling this off really well. So another really cool bass and drum kind of interaction thing is getting those stutter stops in there. It's a great songwriting tool. Okay, so again, you've got them really locked in, but now we're hearing the version where guitars and bass are all playing the same riff, except Dave's not playing one part of the guitar riff that he's stepping back from it to not kind of lose the motion. And I totally get why he's doing it, and it's a smart choice. And this is where tiny, tiny changes from a bass player can make a huge difference. In part of this riff, there's a held kind of bend, a bang kind of sound in the middle of it, where both the guitars just kind of hold this weird suspended note. If he followed them on that, it would sound strange and kind of awkward and just leave this gap. That's the only place he deviates in the riff, and he just keeps the flow going. He's doing the bassist job. Even though this is a really guitar-driven song and he's following them almost note for note, it's those little changes that make it more supportive as a rhythm instrument, and it's those great choices that kind of make it not just a secondary guitar, but fill out the song and do still a bassist job within a really guitar-driven kind of setup. So listening later with the guitar track, I would try and hone in on that if you can and hear the little pieces that he's not playing, and you'll totally understand why. Okay, a lot packed into that section. One thing to notice too is this is really the sign of an amazing rhythm section, in that Gar Samuelson was originally kind of a jazz fusion drummer when he came into Megadeth, and he's really betrayed in that you can hear that all of his beats have a swing to them. He's not as rigid and machine-like as a lot of metal drummers are. He has this kind of loping, very mild swing. Even when he's trying, I think, to play straight, he's just got that feel to him, which is fantastic. And it's what made early Megadeth something so original in its feel. It's that swing. And the fact that Dave Ellefson, not coming from that background, is locked in with him in an amazing way. I mean, you can hear every one of the hits that they're doing in the riffs. They're dead on with each other. And he's just kind of dragging the feel just slightly right along with Gar. So it's really cool that two players from two totally different approaches could match up and lock in that well. And that's a testament to how really good a rhythm section these guys were. Gar Samuelson is a complete loss, just a phenomenal drummer. And you can really hear it in places like this. And it's a testament to Dave's playing that he could meld into Gar's feel that strongly. It's really amazing. And hearing those hits, again, this is where playing a little bit more guitar-like really kind of benefits how this approach is going, because on these hits, he's hitting double stop chords. And it's really thickening out where it might sound weak with the guitar just hitting real quick because it just doesn't give it time to have that much depth. Him adding a chord underneath of it and sharp and short and cut off real quickly, a lot of depth and grunt and power and just really amazing hits. So again, another something to think about if you're a player, putting a line like this together is really, you're going to be responsible for holding the bottom together during short pieces if you're doing these staggered parts. And adding a chord into it and having your muting together and being able to just choke it off as soon as you can, that really makes for a fantastic and dynamic rhythm piece there. So really great showing of that type of concept there. Okay, something to listen for in this section. One, again, is that amazing swing and groove that these guys had. It's fantastic. But once again, Dave is straying just a couple of notes differently than the main riff. He's staying with it most of the time, but the guitars are doing a hard stop at the end of that riff. It's going da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, like they're not, they're giving like an abbreviated ending to the last part of the riff before they turn around to repeat. Dave's keeping that chug going. So the flow and the momentum isn't lost. Again, it's a real subtle thing. He's only hitting 2 more notes than the guitar, but he's keeping that almost subliminal flow going while they're able to stagger stop a little bit over top of it, and it doesn't lose the feel. Again, really small changes can make a powerful bass line, and he's doing his job just absolutely perfectly here. Okay, so at the end sections there, you heard pretty much all of that put together into one piece, where he's doing the groove along with the guitars. He's doing the short stutter stops to give the dynamic, cut and punch type of song motion, where he's riding the riff out a little bit longer, and also where he's doing those chords to give emphasis at things at the stop and at the ending, to build tension and then finally just give one last powerful punch at the end. So it's a very bass guitar style bass line, but it's those little changes that make it the bass line when you're not going to stray too far from what the guitars are really doing. And again, the groove, the swing, all of it, just fantastic. So that's a fantastic example of just solid metal, partway between rhythm guitar and an alternate bass track type of approach. So let's take a look at my last words and hear the complete opposite. Okay, so some things that are similar to the Conjuring in that he's following and using the somewhat dissonant double stops that the guitars are doing. But the cool thing he's doing here is there's a very tight little part at the end of each of these phrases where the guitars have left an opening and he jumps up and does kind of the whack-a-mole of bass playing, and the tiny little space they left him, he jumps up there and does the do-do-do-do-do-do and then jumps down. And that's really kind of a bassist place to shine a lot, is finding those holes where the rhythm guitars or lead guitars have left an opening, and it's like being a boxer coming up and just, that's where you find your quick little opening, you land your punch, you go back into your consistent line. So even in this kind of almost classical sounding type of piece, he's found a place to kind of rock it out and jump up and do his almost like Steve Harris style fill in the middle of it. So that's kind of awesome, and that even though he's following them the majority of the time and contributing to that overall almost string section feel of things, he found a little place to jump up and make a statement on there, and then also again reinforced everything with the chords and following the guitar there. So okay, so again, you can hear that swing still. There's a bit just of a pulse and a groove that isn't so metronomic as a lot of other bands and really straight players have. And don't underestimate how hard it is to get really good, consistent 8th or 16th notes going. And he's like a machine. It just, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da, it's like a machine gun going. Every note is controlled and on the mark. And a lot of players, they forget how difficult that is and they don't practice it. But he's just laying it down there. Now, the next part is something really interesting to listen to. Okay, so that's a really interesting bass line. Definitely not just following the guitars or riding the same thing underneath. He's really pulling away in that he's not following the guitar chords. He's not just laying down supportive 8ths as they're going around. He's put together this kind of strange, esoteric bass line that's just this constantly repeating pattern that would almost be something that, a lead guitar might do over top of a rhythm change or something. So that's really showing that even inside of a metal bass where things tend to be really guitar centric, you can find a way to really contribute something really different and interesting if you just kind of open your mind up a little bit. The other interesting thing about it is that it's kind of funny that by itself, the bass line almost sounds happy and upbeat. And it's actually a dark kind of sounding song. So it shows the strength of contrasting things in that what he's playing by himself sounds almost upbeat, but when you hear the guitar chords over it, the two of them together make something that sounds kind of dark and foreboding. And that's the power of composition and understanding, how things are going to sound not just on their own, but when they're put together. Some parts on their own may not sound like the most evil, sinister riff ever, but when you have two contrasting parts, the harmony that they make together is what really gives it that kind of darkness that this song has. So it's really cool to hear it by itself and be able to understand every part doesn't have to be so dark sounding on its own. Sometimes you need that contrast and the harmonies together create that atmosphere. A really interesting bass line there. And something else to note there, he's still doing a bass player's job too, and a lot of bass players forget this, is that their job is usually to signal the end of a section and that it's going to repeat or that it's going to move into a new part. Bass and drums are what kind of give you that we're moving somewhere sense. And how it's usually done is with drums, they'll do a drum fill at the end of a section of 4 or before moving to a new part. And bass will somehow change what it's doing or add a call and answer type of thing. So for 3 pieces, he's doing a descending line, di-do-do-do-do, di-do-do-do-do. That's what you're hearing over and over. For the final one, and before they turn around to do another section, he goes lower and reverses course, going low to high. Instead of da-da-da-da-da, he goes bo-da-da-da-da. So you've got this kind of call and answer thing, but that low one is telling you end of the phrase, time for the next one, or we're going into a new part. So even though it's kind of an esoteric bass line, he's still doing the bass's job to send those signals to the ear and to work with the drums to keep a composition moving part by part and understandable to the listener. Really interesting part there. Gar's doing this kind of high-speed jazz style snare rolling thing, and Dave is following his feel right over top of it, doing this kind of a triplet, but also drug out at certain points and slurred. And he's doing a really good job at kind of letting the ground dissolve a little bit and following Gar's feel. That's a really hard feel to match. And he's doing a good job there of just kind of adding some dynamics. Some of the emphasis notes are hit a little harder. Some of them are pulled back a little bit. So you're getting this very disorienting kind of feel over top of it, but it doesn't fall out of time. which that would really kind of blow it. Well done, really nails it there. And again, you hear the little fill at the end that goes, and we're moving into the next part. Still doing the bass player's job. One more time, you can really hear the swing, especially in this part. If you listen to this, I mean, it's barely removed from big band or something like that. You know, any of the old standards and classics from the big band era, you hear that tick, 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 tick. They're just rolling with that here. So it's a really, really interesting and distinct feel. And if you've ever wondered why early Megadeth had that kind of rhythmic strangeness that made it so unique, this is it. And this is hearing it at its rawest. It's that swing and the influence of early jazz and some fusion being brought into this, and the fact that Dave could meld into that and lock in with it so well made it one of the most distinct sounds in metal. So it's really cool to hear this. These swung triplets, just so good, man. So good. Again, something really interesting, and I didn't notice anytime I've ever listened to this song, is at the very two ending hits on guitar, and in the song you listen to it, it goes da. It's kind of a step down. The bass doesn't follow that. It hits twice the same place. So I guess he did that to create more tension on the second note. The guitars move and he doesn't. Again, subtle choices. And that's what gives the end of that song that weird, unresolved, kind of dissonant feeling to it. And it kind of leaves you hanging a little bit. And I guess bass moving with it would have made it sound resolved, so he let them move and created a tension on the second hit. Again, another strong songwriting choice, and shows you how powerful bass can be. It's a chord ain't a chord until the bass decides it's going to move with you. So this was a really good comparison on showing how much area can really be covered in metal bass. And having one part being a almost rhythm guitar approach, streamlining and just reinforcing the guitar while keeping the flow of the song going and locking in with the drums, and then one of making a completely different musical statement for a bass line and kind of abandoning the structure of guitars and almost playing against it at times. There's a lot you can do and a number of different flavors that you could add into the music, so I hope it informs your playing if you're a player a little bit. And just an interesting study on how one player can take two radically different approaches to the same style of music. So what did you hear in this? Did you hear some things maybe I missed? And what are your thoughts on the contrasting styles as far as this bass playing went? Let's talk about it down in the comments. Hit me up on there, let me know. And yeah, I'd really like to find out if anybody heard stuff that I didn't as we were going through. And I'll see you down there. Also see you on Metal Bass Monday coming up in a couple of days. Make sure you hit that subscribe and the notification bell, because a lot of people are missing them and then not getting all of these and the Metal Bass Monday episodes. That's going to wrap it for this one. I'll see you next time.